New tonight, a 6 on your side investigation leads to state action against an unlicensed mortgage pitchman. Our story exposed the tactic. The man warned homeowners they face foreclosure. Mike McKnight tells us the state found that tactic to be deceptive. One victim agrees.
A state order to cease and desist shows why the Larsons carried on with their complaint about a reverse mortgage pitchman who showed up in Gail's driveway uninvited.
He scared me. And I was really worried with what he told me. I knew it couldn't be true, but I was really worried.
Jeff Roethlisberger claimed Gail had a mortgage 90 days past due and handed her a note stating her house is in pre-foreclosure, then pitched a reverse mortgage or selling to him. Gail says her house has been paid off about 30 years, and she became suspicious about the reverse mortgage sales pitch because she never received any official notice in the mail that she faced foreclosure. A call to a Douglas County Register of Deeds supervisor confirmed it's a bogus scare.
And what'd you find?
Nothing that says that she owes anything.
Roethlisberger told state investigators his solicitation was a test of the reverse mortgage market, a claim that tested the tempers of Gail's children.
To take advantage of people that you think are in financial distress and going after the elderly, what worse can you do?
The State Department of Banking and Finance denied Roethlisberger a loan originator's license application and ordered him to cease and desist from pitching reverse mortgages.
They interviewed both myself, my mom, and they had watched your interview, Mike, and asked questions about what we had shared.
All that led the state to find Roethlisberger conducted unlicensed activity and misrepresented or concealed material facts to persuade frightened homeowners like Gail to get a loan that she never needed to save her home.
And he was going around and scaring other people. So I'm glad that we did this.
In July, Roethlisberger agreed to a recorded phone interview.
I apologize if it scares somebody, and I stopped doing it because it's not worth it.
After the state orders, Roethlisberger sent me a statement instead that the data he purchased from an out-of-state records peddler showing 5 senior citizens 3 months past due on mortgages was all wrong. He says many elderly will lose their homes, and he was trying to help with information about reverse mortgages. Roethlisberger claims he didn't finish a lender's license application because it would have opened him up to criticism dealing with older people like 87-year-old Gail.
Don't pull in my driveway ever again and tell me my house was in foreclosure.
On your side, Mike McKnight, 6 News.
Roethlisberger claims he was not originating any loans. He adds the National Mortgage Licensing Service hasn't given him any negative marks on its database.